Here's the reimagined story set in Singapore, maintaining the core narrative and length. What exactly happened? A mere 10-second video, filmed by an American businessman at Changi International Airport, instantly spread across the globe, racking up 12 million views. But what astonished the videographer most wasn't the content itself, but the universal comments from around the world. You don't see this in America. Why can only Singapore achieve this? What exactly did the video capture, and why did it shock people worldwide so profoundly? Let's take a look. Mark Wilson, 45, was a senior partner at a top-tier consulting firm headquartered in Los Angeles. With an annual income exceeding 5 million Singapore dollars, he was constantly traveling, making airports feel like his second office. The best airport, of course, was Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, a belief he had never wavered from. In fact, LAX was a global aviation hub, serving 87 million passengers annually. Mark felt immense pride in the magnificent infrastructure of the American aviation industry. Singapore's airports are probably just like those in the Philippines or Indonesia, he had once remarked to a colleague. America's GDP is roughly 30 times Singapore's. That number says it all, Mark firmly believed. However, the real reason for his entrenched views stemmed from a humiliating experience at a Southeast Asian airport the previous year. His luggage had been carelessly tossed by staff, scattering important documents. When he complained, the staff merely shrugged. Asian airports are probably all like this, he thought, that incident only deepening his prejudice. As the plane prepared to land at Changi International Airport, Mark scoffed inwardly. This business trip, I'll show these Singaporeans the true power of America. His current project was a major merger and acquisition with a Singaporean company, an ideal opportunity to introduce the efficiency-driven American business model to Singapore. Singaporeans only focus on minor details and overlook what's truly important, was his assessment. In the World Economic Forum's competitiveness ranking, America stood at second place, while Singapore was 12th. Mark was convinced this figure was a fact. Even when a flight attendant explained Singaporean culture to him, humble and courteous, his expression remained cold. Humility and courtesy are useless in business. Results are everything. As the plane neared touchdown, his arrogance swelled. He imagined Singaporean businessmen bowing before the might of America, but he had no idea the reality he was about to experience would utterly transform his worldview. The moment the plane touched down at Changi International Airport, Mark's life-altering experience was about to begin. Stepping into the terminal, Mark sensed something unusual. The floor was exceptionally clean, sparkling, probably just newly opened, he thought. On his way to immigration, Mark unconsciously glanced at his watch. At LAX, there would surely be long queues at this hour, but Changi's immigration was surprisingly smooth. Must be fewer passengers, Mark concluded. But at the baggage claim, the first crack began to appear in his deeply ingrained assumptions. As staff retrieved luggage from the carousel, they meticulously arranged each suitcase, handles facing outwards. What on earth? You don't see this in America. American staff simply loaded bags onto the carousel, never caring about their orientation or position. But Changi staff arranged all handles in the same direction, making it easy for travelers to pick them up. So inefficient, a waste of time, Mark frowned. In his value system, such behavior was incomprehensible. The foundation of American business was time efficiency. Every minute and second directly impacted profit. But a greater bewilderment awaited him. On his way to the exit, Mark got lost. Changi Airport signs were multilingual, but for him, accustomed to America's large, simple signage, Singapore's detail-oriented design actually made him feel confused. "Excuse me, where is the taxi stand?" he asked a nearby airport staff member in English. Though the staff member's English wasn't fluent, they tried their best to explain. But what surprised Mark even more was the staff member's next action. They seemed to feel that simply speaking might not be clear enough, so they began to personally escort him to the taxi stand. "Oh, you don't have to go to such trouble," Mark felt somewhat embarrassed. At American airports, staff would never personally escort individual travelers. Staff's duty was to perform their designated tasks. Additional services were paid options. But the Changi staff member smiled and replied, "It's our duty to make customers feel at ease." An indescribable feeling welled up in Mark. This staff member had no incentive, no reward. Why do this for me? This was an act inexplicable by American rationalism. Upon reaching the taxi stand, the staff member bowed respectfully and turned to leave. Mark stood alone, stunned. What is this feeling? His heart was filled with confusion and warmth, but he quickly shook off the thought. Now is not the time for emotion. In business, efficiency is truth, Mark told himself. After getting into the taxi, he tried to confirm his impressions of Singapore through conversation with the driver. Are the airport staff always this friendly? The driver replied, as if it were obvious. Oh, that's normal. Isn't customer service paramount a given? Mark's confusion deepened. Upon checking into his hotel, Mark was reviewing documents for the next day's negotiation, but couldn't find an important presentation file. He remembered putting it in his checked luggage last night. Could it be? An ominous thought flashed through his mind. He frantically searched all his suitcases, but couldn't find the document. Tomorrow's negotiation was crucial to his career. If this project succeeded, Mark could be promoted to Asia-Pacific General Manager. But without this vital document, the negotiation would likely be hopeless. Damn it! Just like airports in other countries! Mark trembled with anger. The nightmare he had experienced in Asia once again haunted him. Lost luggage, irresponsible staff, ultimately having to accept the loss. He firmly believed all Asian airports were the same. The next morning, he called Changi International Airport's Lost and Found. I'm looking for an important document from a flight that arrived last night. The polite staff member on the other end listened to his situation and replied, All right, I'll check for you immediately. Please wait. Mark held little hope for about 30 minutes. In America, checking for lost luggage took a long time. In Singapore, it would surely take longer. But unexpectedly, the phone rang 20 minutes later. Your document has been found. The staff member's voice carried a hint of relief. Really? Mark couldn't hide his surprise. Yes, it was found under the seat during last night's cleaning. We immediately secured it here. When Mark rushed to the airport, the staff had already carefully kept his document. The document was intact, not a single page missing. Thank you so much. You've helped me a great deal. But what the staff member said next left Mark speechless. Actually, we were just preparing to send the document to your hotel. We apologize for making you come all the way here. Mark was thoroughly bewildered. He had carelessly lost the document himself, but the staff member was apologizing to him and even planned to personally deliver it to his hotel. This was a service that would absolutely never happen in America. Why do this for me? Mark couldn't help but ask. The staff member replied with a slight look of mild embarrassment. Since we are safeguarding a customer's important item, we have a responsibility to safely return it to you. Besides, how could we abandon a troubled customer? An indescribable feeling once again rose in Mark. This staff member had no obligation to go to such lengths. Why so dedicated? Why sacrifice their own time for others? When there's no benefit or reward, we're truly happy to help. The staff member's smile seemed to genuinely convey satisfaction, as if they were happy for their own sake. In the taxi on the way to his meeting, Mark fell into thought. Everything he had experienced in the past 24 hours defied his value system. These actions, contradictory to efficiency and rationalism, yet left a pleasant feeling in his heart. Did I overlook something important? But he quickly dismissed the thought. Don't get emotional. In business, results are everything, Mark encouraged himself. He was determined to prove the superiority of the American efficiency-first business model in the upcoming negotiation. The negotiation proceeded more smoothly than expected. Mark's presentation was flawless, and the executives of the Singaporean company listened intently. If we introduce our system, we can reduce costs by 30% and cut manpower by half. The Singaporean side seemed interested in the efficiency presented by the numbers, but at the end of the negotiation, an unexpected question arose. So, what about the employee employment issues? Have you considered the employees who would be laid off? Mark inwardly scoffed. In business, eliminating inefficient parts was normal. It would lead the company to growth. But the Singaporean executive's expressions darkened. We believe employees are like family. We cannot easily abandon them. Mark couldn't comprehend. Bringing emotions into business was irrational behavior. Emotions couldn't make a company grow. To succeed in global competition, efficiency was indispensable. The negotiation was thus temporarily adjourned. The Singaporean side said they would reconsider, but Mark knew this was tantamount to a rejection. On the way back to the hotel, he couldn't hide his frustration. Singaporeans are truly difficult to understand, still not keeping up with world standards, but the events of the next day confused him even further. In the hotel lobby, he ran into a young executive from the Singaporean company he had just negotiated with yesterday. Mr. Wilson, the employee, respectfully bowed. Thank you very much for yesterday. Mark raised his guard. He worried he would hear sarcastic remarks after being rejected. But what happened next was the complete opposite. Actually, I wanted Mr. Wilson to understand Singaporean culture better. If you have time, would you like to visit our company? Mark felt confused. They had rejected the negotiation, so why invite him to visit their company? Surely, there's some ulterior motive. I'm not too interested, Mark replied coldly. But the young employee did not give up. The efficiency Mr. Wilson spoke of is very important. But we also have our own kind of efficiency. If you could see it with your own eyes, I believe you would definitely make new discoveries. Finally, Mark couldn't resist his curiosity and agreed. But in his heart, he still held a strong belief. It's just to see Singapore's inefficient management style, nothing more. Perhaps it's a good opportunity to once again prove America's superiority. On the day of the visit, Mark was astonished. The atmosphere of the Singaporean company was completely different from America. The relationship between employees was like family, but in Mark's eyes, this was a picture of inefficiency. How can such an overly relaxed environment generate competitiveness? He scoffed inwardly. During the factory tour, employees were meticulously maintaining machinery. In America, this kind of work is outsourced to specialized companies. Truly no cost awareness, Mark firmly believed. During lunch break at the employee canteen, he was even more surprised. Managers and regular employees sat together, eating. You don't see this in America. No hierarchy? How do they maintain organizational discipline? But that evening, an incident occurred that shook Mark's values to their core. A minor accident happened in the factory, and an employee sustained a slight injury. But the Singaporean company's response left Mark speechless. The moment the accident occurred, the atmosphere in the factory changed. But there was no chaos, as Mark expected. Instead, there was a surprisingly calm and organized response. The closest employee immediately provided first aid to the injured person, while another called an ambulance. Someone else contacted the injured person's family, probably following SOP, standard operating procedures, Mark initially thought. In America, there were also procedures for emergencies. But what happened next exceeded his imagination. When the factory manager arrived at the scene, the first thing he did was apologize to the injured person. I'm sorry. It's all due to my lax management. In America, the first thing to do would be to ascertain responsibility and assess legal risks. This emotional apology would be considered dangerous behavior, but the factory manager's apology was clearly heartfelt. Even more astonishing was the subsequent development. After the injured person was sent to the hospital, the factory manager gathered all employees. This accident indicates a problem with our safety management. Starting tomorrow, we will review all work processes. We absolutely cannot let the same accident happen again. Mark was completely bewildered. The cause of the accident was the injured person's own negligence. Why did the factory manager need to take responsibility? In America, this would be classified as individual responsibility. But what he found even more incomprehensible was the reaction of the other employees. No one blamed the factory manager. Instead, they all said, "We should also be more careful ourselves." The entire organization taking responsibility together? This is too inefficient, Mark complained inwardly. But what he saw the next day delivered a decisive blow to his value system. When he returned to the factory, the employee who had been injured yesterday was back at work, still bandaged. Why aren't you resting? Don't you have the right to take sick leave? When Mark asked, the employee replied, with a look of slight difficulty, I've already caused everyone enough trouble. How can I rest? It's just a small injury. I can do desk work. This answer left Mark speechless. In America, taking as long a sick leave as possible was normal because it was a worker's right. But this employee chose responsibility over rights. Even more surprising were the actions of the other employees. They naturally shared the injured person's work. No one complained. Instead, they all asked with concern, Are you all right? Don't push yourself too hard. What exactly is going on? Mark was completely confused. Prioritizing the group's interests over individual interests. Prioritizing responsibility over rights. This completely contradicted the business theories he had learned. During lunch break, he asked the young employee who had guided him, Why is everyone so dedicated to the company? Wouldn't it be okay to think more about yourselves? The young employee thought for a moment before replying, The company supports our lives, so it's normal for us to support the company. Helping each other ultimately leads to happiness for everyone. Mark still couldn't understand. But when he saw the company's performance data, he became even more perplexed. Compared to efficiency-focused American companies, their productivity was in no way inferior. On the contrary, employee retention was astonishingly high, and quality was significantly better. Probably a coincidence, just happened to perform well during this period, Mark told himself. But deep down, another feeling began to sprout. Is the efficiency I believed in just superficial? Perhaps true efficiency lies at a deeper level. This question quietly took root in his heart. On his departure day, Mark arrived at Changi International Airport with mixed feelings. A week here had greatly shaken his preconceived notions about Singapore, but he still couldn't fully accept it. Ultimately, American business is the global standard. Singapore is just an anomaly, he told himself. As he walked towards the check-in counter, an unexpected problem occurred. System error. Cannot confirm Mr. Wilson's reservation. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience. The system is currently being repaired. The counter staff bowed very politely. Mark began to feel impatient. In America, such problems were common, but usually, he would only get a curt, "It's a system issue," and that would be the end of it. But Changi International Airport's handling was completely different. "We offer our deepest apologies for the inconvenience caused. We will immediately call the manager to assist you." A few minutes later, the manager appeared, and her actions left Mark dumbfounded. She was a middle-aged woman in uniform. "My name is Madam Lee. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused by this system issue," Madam Lee bowed respectfully. In America, a manager would never personally come out to apologize like this. But what was even more surprising was the subsequent resolution. "We will upgrade you to first class and provide a voucher for future use as a token of our apology." These words struck Mark with immense shock. In America, organizational responsibilities were clearly delineated. Not getting involved in matters outside one's job scope was a basic principle. But Madam Lee crossed organizational boundaries, prioritizing customer satisfaction. While waiting in the VIP lounge, Mark reflected on all the events of the past week. The airport staff's friendly guidance, the dedicated employee who tried to return his lost item, the company that cared for its employees, like family, the factory where all staff jointly took responsibility for an accident. And now this manager who disregarded organizational boundaries for a customer. The common thread in all these incidents was a heart that cared for others. Even if it seemed to contradict efficiency and rationalism, it created the best results. Perhaps this is Singapore's true strength. As boarding time approached, Mark unconsciously pulled out his smartphone. He wanted to film Madam Lee's service, but his reason for filming was entirely different from his initial intent. At first, he planned to mock Singapore's seemingly excessive service. But now, he wanted to introduce this excellent service to the world. When he sought Madam Lee's permission to film, she replied with some shyness, "I was just doing my duty, but if it can help, please go ahead." The video was only 10 seconds long. It showed Madam Lee carefully handling luggage and bowing with a smile to a customer. This seemingly ordinary scene, but for Mark, he knew it demonstrated Singapore's true power. "I was truly wrong. I overlooked the most important thing," he murmured to himself as he boarded. He decided to spread this video around the world. Back in Los Angeles, Mark immediately uploaded the video to social media with the caption, "Is this real?" A 10-second video, filmed at Changi International Airport. In the comments, he wrote his genuine feelings. "I completely misunderstood Singapore. The staff in the video didn't do anything special. They just genuinely cared for customers. But I realized this is Singapore's true strength." The video quickly went viral. Within one day, viewership surpassed 1 million. Within a week, it reached 12 million views. Comments from around the world far exceeded Mark's expectations. "You definitely don't see this at American airports. This is what they call Singaporean service, isn't it? It's not just superficial service. You can feel genuine care from the heart. Why can only Singapore achieve this?" Particularly impressive were the comments from airport staff worldwide. "We also want to emulate them. We had forgotten to care for customers. We need to change our mindset starting tomorrow." Mark was deeply moved. His experience was now influencing the entire world. But the biggest change occurred within Mark himself. His business negotiation style underwent a huge transformation. He no longer solely pursued efficiency as before, but began to consider things from the other party's perspective. Reducing costs is important, but the employment issues of all employees are equally important. How about we work together to find a way to achieve both? This approach was initially questioned by his colleagues. What happened to Mark in Singapore? This isn't like you, but the results were unexpected. Proposals that considered the other party's perspective increasingly gained acceptance from various companies, building long-term trust. The rate of repeat customers also significantly increased. 6 months later, Mark was promoted to Asia Pacific General Manager. But what he was most proud of was another thing. His video became the catalyst for service improvement in airports worldwide. This service enhancement, which began to be called the Singapore Standard, greatly improved user satisfaction. Messages of gratitude poured in from all over the world to Mark. Your video made me realize Singapore's greatness. I also want to visit Singapore. You taught me what true care is. Now, Mark visits Singapore several times a year. Besides business, there is much he still wants to learn from Singapore. A few days ago, he again met Madam Lee at Changi International Airport. Welcome back, Mr. Wilson. She still remembered him. That video of yours is very famous worldwide. I was just doing something very ordinary. I'm truly embarrassed, Mark replied softly. Madam Lee, it's precisely what you consider ordinary that changed this world. Singapore's caring heart is bringing hope to people all over the world. I also want to be a part of it. Walking through Changi International Airport, Mark's heart was filled with gratitude. He sincerely thanked his good fortune in encountering Singapore, and at the same time, felt shame for his arrogance a year ago. Efficiency is important, but there is something even more important than that. A heart that cares for others can lead to true success. This was the most important lesson Mark learned from Singapore, and now he is striving to spread this lesson throughout the world. The story, which began with a mere 10-second video, continues to reverberate across the globe. So, what are your thoughts on today's video? Thank you for watching.